Now, we can cross live to Daniel McAdams, Executive Director of the Ron Paul Institute. Thank you very much for being with us here on RT International. Now, these sanctions come very late in the day for Obama and his administration. Do you expect that the Trump team will go along with these sanctions and with these ideas, or could they simply be scrapped on January 20th?
Well, I think certainly as President Trump has the ability to issue an executive order completely nullifying every single one of President Obama's executive orders, and I think that would be a good place to start. But it is extraordinary, and it's an extraordinary break of protocol for an outgoing president with very few days left in office to initiate a major foreign policy activity such as this is. It really is unprecedented, I think, and it's extraordinary, and it's a slap in the face. What I would like to see incoming President Donald Trump do is speak out and tell the Russians that, look, I intend to overturn this the day I get in office. This is not how I intend to start my administration. And then I would like to see the Russians simply say, okay, then we won't retaliate. That would be something very interesting and novel, and it would really set the stage, and it would really demonstrate how weak the outgoing Obama administration and how desperate the administration really is.
Well, what do you make about the timing of this announcement, considering it's the same day that Russia announced a ceasefire agreement for Syria that was brokered with the help of Turkey and Iran, of all people, sidelining the U.S. in terms of their involvement in the Syrian peace deal? Is this a coincidence?
Oh, I think it's a great point. I don't think anybody believes that there is not something to this. And it also just underscores the vindictiveness, the pettiness of the people that Obama has surrounded himself with in foreign policy. Finally, the Russians and the Turks and the Iranians had to go around the U.S. because the U.S. has been nothing but obstructionist when it comes to solving the Syria problem for years. How many thousands of people have died while the U.S. has been protecting people that knows are tied to radical jihadists? So I think this definitely is a parting shot from the administration against the Russians for spearheading what may well turn out to be a lasting peace plan for Syria. And they did it without the U.S.
Now, these new sanctions, follow the release of an official report, if you will, which details alleged Russian interference. However, it doesn't really explain how the two hacking groups described there are linked to the Russian government. It also doesn't have any specific evidence, publicly at least, to back it up. What do you make of all of that, or the lack of evidence?
Well, I think it's faith-based intelligence. They want us just to believe them because we should. Unfortunately, they've demonstrated that they are expert in crafting fake news, as you pointed out, and as your reporters have pointed out. There are so many qualifiers in this report. There is even a disclaimer at the beginning of the report saying, this may or may not be true. They certainly didn't go no further in establishing how these two hacking groups, if they were indeed responsible for the hacks, how they were tied to the Russian government whatsoever. They simply cited some private security companies that have made these claims. Well, I'm sorry, we spend $80 billion a year on U.S. intelligence capabilities. Certainly they can do better than this. We've all been through the Just Trust Us on WMDs in Iraq, and frankly, most Americans, I don't think, are ready to believe Just Trust Us again.
Now, are you surprised at the scope of these latest sanctions and the expulsions?
I think it's certainly not unprecedented. In 2001, I think there was a larger expulsion. I think it was some 50 Russians who were expelled from the U.S., and this does happen from time to time, but it is significant. It's not 2 or 3 people. I find it rather amusing that the Russians have been operating this house and property in Maryland since 1972, and all of a sudden the media has discovered that it's a massive Russian spy operation that has to be shut down, and nobody questions if this is true. How the U.S. government let it go on for so long is quite amusing. But I think these sanctions, they look bad, but I think the incoming administration could very easily overturn them. The question is whether he can stand up to the hawks in his own party in Congress and in the Senate who do like these sanctions, who do want to be more aggressive toward Russia. That's going to be a real challenge for him.
despite a lot of the mainstream media focus on Russia and the alleged hacking, Barack Obama's security advisor, Susan Rice, says that more attention needed to be paid to this scandal. Let's listen to what she had to say on this.
The fact that they did not focus on this issue to the extent that we thought they would and they should is something that I think the press needs to do some introspection about.
All right. Now, do you share this assessment by Susan Rice?
Well, once again, this is the Democratic Party trying to explain why they completely botched an election. They had a very, very unattractive candidate in many ways. They ran a campaign that catered to the elites. We're expected to believe that millions of Rust Belt voters who had voted for Barack Obama in 2008 were suddenly themselves hacked by the Russians and convinced to vote for Trump. It just beggars belief. Were the Russians, did they hack Donna Brazile and force her to sneak the questions to Hillary in the debates? You know, it's just sore losers, I think.
I want to go back to something that you said about Trump should come out and say that, hey, come January 20th, we're going to have a different policy. There are some people who are already controversially accusing Trump of violating the Logan Act, meaning the one president at one time. Obama is currently the president of the United States. In theory, he can do whatever he wants until January 20th. If Trump does come out and say anything now in regards to this, is that in violation of the Logan Act?
Well, I think he can certainly be vague. He doesn't have to say specifically what he's going to do, but he could say, I'm going to take a very serious look at some of these executive orders that have bypassed Congress, that have done things they shouldn't do. I have a very different philosophy with regard to foreign relations, the importance of getting back on track with finding common mutual interests with Russia. That doesn't mean we will agree on anything, but we will work together where there are mutual interests. I think he can give a certain signal to the Russians that a new sheriff will be in town, and hopefully that would inspire the Russians to be more moderate in their response.
All right. Do you think that how do you think that this is all going to play out if we look down the rabbit hole?
Well, I think the real wild card is the neocons. They're worming into the Trump administration. They would love nothing more than to inspire more conflict overseas, whether it's with Russia or with China. The Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, his only complaint about Obama's new sanctions is that they should have been more and they should have been faster. So that's the opposition for you. And we all know that Lindsey Graham and John McCain would like to see, a U.S. war with Russia. It almost sounds like they want to punish Russia. So I think he's going to have a very difficult time unless he stands up very hard and very early on to the neocons and puts them in their place. Let's hope he does that.
All right. Daniel McAdams, Executive Director of the Ron Paul Institute, thank you very much for being with us here on RT International. Very interesting to hear your thoughts.